ruler. They camped by the sea, by the ship, and under cover of darkness they ate the little food that they had from their voyage, combined with the scraps that the slavers had had on their persons before meeting their untimely deaths. Clovis was still tickled at the thought, but even he did not dare set a fire to cook with. Besides, the food that they had didn't need cooked anyway, though it would have been nice to eat a warm meal rather than a cold one. They gave no food to their captive, but instead let him go hungry. His wounds were patched as well as they could be, and should they heal without infection, he might serve them well, or so Clovis thought. Tomorrow he would take them somewhere with men, and Clovis would make his case, though perhaps where the man took him he did not want to go. Shrugging to himself in thought, he figured that tomorrow was as good a day to die as any, and so he ate his food in silence, next to Lucas, who was already fast asleep. Nothing kept that man awake. The following morning came without surprise. Nobody had attacked them in the night, nobody awaited them in the morning, and so it seemed that Clovis had been right. The slavers had no men. They had been desperate, and that is why they had waited by the sea. Still, they were clever, and Clovis made sure not to underestimate his captive, but rather to use him. He did not want to waste such a potentially precious asset, though Clovis knew that his value would dwindle upon finding new people. The captive, too, surely had anticipated what would happen to him once he gave them what they wanted. Clovis grinned at the thought. Wordlessly, the captive led them to, well, somewhere. It took half the day to arrive, but eventually they arrived at a small village next to a large mountain, it appeared, of around 50 people comprised of men, women, and children. It was an interesting place, and everything seemed spotless, except for the people. Their homes were great and made from stone, and their forges, which were evident, were grand and functioning. Surely they had weapons, Clovis thought, and therefore men, or they knew where they could be found. Clovis wondered what had happened, or what had motivated the captive to bring them here, as he could have brought them anywhere. Perhaps he thought that they were slavers, and that Clovis wanted to take these people as slaves, but of course Clovis had decided to never do such a thing, however useful it might have proved. He could not forget his year of slavery. The townsfolk, villagers really, eyed and stared at Clovis' band of men without awe, but with fear. In total there were 7 fully grown men capable of joining Clovis' army, which disappointed Clovis but did not discourage him. He stepped over to his captive, unsheathed his sword, and cut him down in front of the other people, or the people there. He wanted them to know that he was in control, but he knew that he could not make them hate him, so he took the supplies that the captive had on him and threw them on the ground in front of the group of villagers. One of the men approached. "Are you from Hild?" he asked, somewhat timidly, though he was a broad man. Clovis nodded, surprised to hear him speak his language, and replied, "Yes, we are from Hild, and this," he pointed at the supplies, "this you may keep." The broad man nodded and accepted on behalf of the village. He was a large man with black hair and stubble, as apparently he shaved, which Clovis often scoffed at, but decided not to mention. "Thank you," said the man. "My name is Urt." Clovis nodded. "I am Clovis, and you can be of great use to us, Urt. Do others here speak our language?" "Just me," said Urt, "and my wife." Clovis nodded once more. "Where is she?" Urt hesitated for obvious reasons, so Clovis put up his hand and assured him that she would not be touched. Urt, without another choice, pointed her out. She stepped forward bravely. She was quite pretty, Clovis noted, and she spoke in a sweet voice. She was obviously from Hild. That much was obvious, and it was obvious that she had taught her husband, Urt, the language, though Clovis did not know what necessitated his learning it. Perhaps he was just a curious individual, or perhaps not. Either way, Clovis wanted to know. "Why did you learn our language, Urt?" he asked him as the villagers watched. By that time all had come out of their homes, if they weren't hiding, to see what would happen next. Urt promptly replied, "I had a curiosity for it," and he gestured toward his wife. "She was a very good teacher." "I see that," said Clovis, who, despite noticing Urt's accent, tended to agree that he'd been taught well and probably had some kind of aptitude for such things. "Will you accompany us on our journey, Urt?" Urt looked at him and asked, "What exactly are you doing here, my lord?" Clovis was impressed, to say the least, and gave his reply curtly. "I'm here for an army, nothing more. We're going to take the kingdom of Hild for ourselves." And then Clovis repeated, "Will you accompany us on this journey?" The men were somewhat surprised. They had not heard Clovis speak of overtaking the entire kingdom, though some had admittedly suspected such a thing. None spoke up, however, as none wanted to be left alone in a strange land such as this, and so the conversation between Clovis and Urt continued. Urt nodded, "Yes, Lord." He likely felt that he had no choice, but as his language ability showed, he was also curious, and likely a more adventurous man than he let on. And the man undoubtedly had met other travelers. Clovis, for one, was happy to have him. Clovis and his company, if you could call their small band of warriors such, asked permission to dine with the local villagers, although rather dirty, did not seem as if they were starving. In fact, they seemed pretty well off for a place without men to defend itself. Perhaps they had just been lucky, Clovis supposed, but perhaps someone else protected them, or by virtue of his rule protected them. A king, perhaps. Clovis wanted to know, and he asked Urt such things at a small hall within the village. "Urt," said Clovis from across the table. Lucas sat next to him. "Is there a family that protects you?" "Lord," asked Urt in his strange accent, clearly not understanding, but his wife, who sat next to him, told him in his own tongue what had been said. Urt curtly replied that he had understood Clovis, but that he had not been sure why he had asked about family, and quickly his wife became quiet. Clovis noticed this. Such were the way of things with women. "So," said Clovis, "you have a duke who rules you and protects you." Urt shook his head. "Only the queen protects us, Lord." "The queen?" asked Clovis. "We have not allowed queens to rule in Hild for many years, not since the time of Queen Lucia, the Tormentor, as she was called. Why do you allow a queen to rule over you here?" "I do not choose to be ruled by her," said Urt somewhat guardedly. "She simply rules, and yes, she's the one who protects us, if you can call it that." "I would," said Clovis. "You are not dead. You are quite healthy and well fed. Why shouldn't she be praised?" Urt looked around almost suspiciously, as he should have been. Clovis was testing him, prying him for information. Hesitantly, he responded. "She takes most of our men," he shrugged, "for her army." "Army?" Clovis asked. "Why would she take your men for her army?" Clovis was feigning interest in Urt's problems with the queen, but all he wanted was more information about where they were and whom ruled. He wondered why he had not heard of the queen before now, but he supposed that not many people traveled overseas to Hild, and Hild kept mostly to itself, warring and doing such things amongst itself as was its usual ways. Urt beamed with some enthusiasm, replying that the queen should not take so many of his men when they could be tending fields, etc., and doing such things that would benefit the local economy. But then at the end of his somewhat lengthy spiel, he admitted that yes, she was quite intelligent, and that yes, she did protect him, and that yes, she had an army, a big one. And that is what interested Clovis. "Take me to her," he said, as he drained a cup of something bitter. "I want to meet this queen."